I want to talk a little bit about the physiology of breathing. You've mentioned a few different body systems that might be impacted by a breathwork practice. I think the lungs are more, maybe most intuitive. So, will you talk to us a little bit about how breathing impacts the lungs, but then also some other organ or body systems that really can benefit from intentional breathing?
Yeah. So, one thing that people may not necessarily realize, but our immune system actually starts in our nose. So, our defense against the outside world starts with the air that we breathe in. Each day, we breathe in about 30 pounds of air, which means that we consume more air in a day than water and food in a week. And it's something that interacts with our lung microbiome. So, the quality of air that goes into our lungs is very, very important, which means the orifice through which we breathe also makes a big difference as well. So our nose is lined with a nasal mucosa, and this nasal mucosa, essentially connects with the air that we're breathing in. So the purpose of the nose is to slow the air down. By slowing the air down, we're able to filter it. So we have nose hairs and cilia that mechanically filter the air. We have our nasal mucosa, which is producing nitric oxide. Nitric oxide has many functions. One of its functions is to disinfect the air. We have turbinates, which spin the air and increase the pressure of the air. So we're essentially perfecting the air. We're moisture regulating it, temperature regulating it, and pressure regulating it. So we're able to get more oxygen delivery to our alveoli with each breath that we take through our nose versus breathing in through our mouth. Our mouth, as many people might know, especially those listening to this podcast, is the dirtiest part of our body from a microbiology standpoint. So if we're breathing through our mouth, we're dirtying the air from a microbiology perspective with every breath that we take. So our nose is designed for us to intake the air. And then, if anything, our mouth can be designed to express the air or expire the air. But ideally, we want to be breathing in and out through our nose. Now, the other thing that we want to pay attention to is the position of our tongue. When our tongue is placed in the roof of our mouth, which is where it should be the majority of the time, unless we're speaking or breathing through our mouth, it actually acts as a spacer. So it helps us form our dental arch. So for young children, if you have young children or grandchildren, if you're listening to this, pay attention to their tongue positioning. Nobody talks about this. We might look at their neck posture or their shoulder posture or their back. And if they're slouching, we might make a recommendation to them. But the placement of their tongue plays a huge role in how their facial structure is going to form. So when we're young or even as adults, gravity is kind of pulling everything down and inwards. Our tongue actually sits in the center of our jaw and our face. It pushes everything outwards. So it naturally creates a nice, beautiful dental arch, prevents overcrowding of the teeth, and there's a magic button at the roof of your mouth that instantly soothes the nervous system. And you may have witnessed this if you ever see a child sucking on a pacifier. If you take that pacifier away from them, they instantly start crying. And the moment you give it back to them, they instantly relax. If you give a child their mother's nipple, instantly it hits that magic button in the roof of their mouth and they instantly relax. The thumb does the same thing. So the placement of the tongue is very crucial in the way somebody's breathing. Now, other structures that are affected, so that's physical structures, but other structures that are affected when we breathe is our cardiorespiratory system. So if you think about our heart's sandwiched in between our lungs and our diaphragm. So with every breath that we take, our diaphragm moves up and down. We take about 23,000 breaths a day, some people more, some people less. And with each breath we take, our diaphragm is assisting the heart in pumping blood. Our lungs, as they expand and contract, is assisting the heart in pumping blood. So the way we breathe takes pressure off of the heart. It takes some of the workload off of the heart if we breathe correctly. But if somebody is a short, shallow breather, now their heart has to work overtime in order for it to pump the blood through their body. The diaphragm is also situated in a very specific and amazing position. There's no other place it should be except where it is, because underneath our diaphragm, we have some of our largest lymph nodes in our body. And so with each breath we take, we're pumping lymph and removing the sludge and the waste that the organs are producing as well. And of course, one of our most important organs, which has over 800 known functions, is our liver. And our liver is conveniently located right below our diaphragm. So when we breathe correctly, we're also supporting the detoxification and function of the liver and the digestive organs as well. So the diaphragm acts as a piston that mechanically pumps lymph that helps us digest our food better and move the food through the peristaltic function and also the mechanical movement of the bowel. And it also helps our liver in moving sludge through it as well. So there's a variety of systems that are impacted when we breathe correctly. So our facial structure, our immune health, our lung microbiome, our cardiorespiratory system, our heart specifically, and then of course our lymphatic system. But there's another system that's impacted by the way we breathe, and that's our myofascial system. So the myofascial system is like a spider web that connects the cell nucleus of every cell in our body together, and it's like a internal worldwide web. So it's like an internal internet that allows our body to communicate instantaneously with itself. So it's a hydrostatic system, which means the communication and force distribution happens instantaneously. And at the center of all of this is our diaphragm. The diaphragm serves as a conduit to evenly and equally distribute the force through this system. What people may not know is that our diaphragm also is where we store trauma, and our lungs is where we store grief. So mental and spiritual aspects of our health are also affected by our respiratory system.
I have such an awareness of how I'm breathing as you're talking, just like picturing all of these structures and how they're affected as I'm breathing. And it's actually stunning to me to think about all these systems that are impacted. I certainly take this for granted. And I've heard you speak at other events, and you've mentioned that we can use our breath work, if we need to change our heart rate, our blood pressure, different markers of health. Can we really get some specificity in how our body's behaving by changing our breath?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I mentioned, and maybe we'll unpack this a little bit more, is our nitric oxide levels. So
Mhm.
when we breathe through our nose, we increase nitric oxide production by sixfold. Something as simple as humming increases nitric oxide by 15-fold. Now, people who are habitual mouth breathers, which is about 50% of the population, and those habitual mouth breathers, about 66% of people breathe through their mouth at night. So we have a society where the majority of people, day and night, breathe through their mouth. When we breathe through our mouth, it changes the pH of our mouth. It dries out our saliva, which is very protective of our teeth and oral health. And it's the number one cause of cavities. So more than sugar and other things, of course, you don't want to eat those things either, but breathing through our mouth is what causes the majority of cavities that people have. When we breathe through our mouth, it also destroys the healthy bacteria that help us make nitric oxide. So, nitric oxide has several functions. One of them is to act as a disinfectant. It kills viruses on contact. In fact, during the COVID era, there were companies that were developing nitric oxide sprays that you would spray in your nose to kill COVID. The other thing that we know is the nitric oxide acts as a vasodilator. So it helps increase the dilation of our blood vessels. So now we get more blood flow going to all parts of our body. And then the other thing that nitric oxide does is it lowers blood pressure because of that dilation effect. Now, Viagra, when it was originally developed, was developed as a blood pressure medication. But most studies, as you know, are done on men. And there was perhaps a side effect of that increase in nitric oxide levels that were circulating that turned it into a blockbuster drug. But if you recall, during COVID, people were being prescribed Viagra because of the fact that it increases or it recycles your own nitric oxide. It doesn't necessarily increase it, but eating healthy foods can do that as well. And so something as simple as breathing through our nose can have a profound effect on our physiology, just to say the least. That's like one thing that we can do, and it's measurable. So you can actually, and I'll do this at the event, you can actually measure people's nitric oxide levels with a very simple test strip, a saliva test strip. I believe that every practitioner, if you see people in person, you should be testing their nitric oxide levels. It takes about 10 seconds. You just place it on their tongue as long as they haven't eaten anything recently in the last like 10 or 15 minutes. And it's going to measure the amount of nitric oxide they're making. Usually for men and women after 40, the levels plummet significantly. And as a result, their immune defenses go down, their blood pressure may go up, their circulation, especially microcirculation, becomes compromised. So you want to start thinking brain fog, hypertension, immune dysregulation, and people who just seem to always be under the weather. Amazing things start happening when we start bringing people's nitric oxide levels back up again.
And maybe this is nuanced because everybody is so individual, but maybe a ballpark or average, how long does it take to see an increase in nitric oxide production? I mean, are we breathing for 10 minutes and we already see improvements? What does that time frame look like?
Yeah, so it's going to happen pretty much instantaneously. So something like the vibration that's created by humming is going to stimulate the nasal mucosa to increase nitric oxide production. Now, one thing I want to want everyone to know, it also depends on the oral bacteria in your mouth. So if you don't have adequate amounts of healthy nitrates in your diet. Arugula, beets are a source of them, for example, and you are a habitual mouth breather or use mouthwash, then you're obviously going to have compromised levels of nitric oxide production. So it's something to keep in mind. It does depend on our nutritional status, and the way we breathe habitually is also going to impact it. Now, what we do see is if we supplement with nitric oxide support, that within an hour we can see those levels significantly increase.